Welcome back to Fairly Fictional. Today we explore the story of the largest dragon ever to fly the skies of Middle-earth, Ancalagon the Black. Join me as we discuss Ancalagon's devastating introduction and his role in the closing stages of the First Age, and seek to unravel the mystery of just how large this dragon really was. We begin in the shadowed halls of Angband, amidst the endless forges and smoky caverns where Morgoth bred his most powerful weapons. Huge, fire-breathing, winged drakes, which had never before been seen in Middle-earth. Ancalagon was destined to be the strongest of the winged fire drakes. His scales were like dark armour, immense and impenetrable. His eyes, like burning coals, pierced through the murky darkness of his master's lair. As years passed, Ancalagon grew in size and malice under Morgoth's watchful eye. His wings, vast as storm clouds, could eclipse the sun itself, casting long shadows of dread across the lands. His breath, a torrent of unquenchable fire, was feared even amongst the ranks of Morgoth's own minions. But Morgoth dared not unleash Ancalagon until he was fully grown. As Ancalagon grew within the walls of Angband, Eärendil the mariner sailed to Valinor and pleaded with the Valar to help free Middle-earth from the clutches of Morgoth. And so the host of Valinor was assembled, consisting not only of the Vanya and the Noldor who resided in Valinor, but also of some of the Maiar, including Eönwë. It is unclear whether any of the Valar were part of the host. In any case, there is no evidence that any of them took part in the battle. The host of Valinor landed in Beleriand in 545 of the First Age to fight the forces of Morgoth in a war that would last over 40 years. The host of Valar prevailed, defeating Morgoth's armies and destroying the Balrogs, save those that fled and hid in deep places. It was in the final years of the war, when Angband was besieged by the host, that Morgoth would unleash his greatest weapons. In the year 587, Morgoth, facing the united forces of the Valar, elves and men, was on the brink of defeat. It was then that the winged drakes, whose existence had thus far been concealed by Morgoth from the forces of good, were finally unleashed. Ancalagon the Black, leading a host of fire drakes, erupted from Angband with volcanic fury, his arrival turning the tide of battle. The sky was ablaze with the dragon's wrath, and beneath his shadow the armies of the Valar faltered. His appearance was a turning point in the battle, and his size and power caused mass destruction and terror amongst the ranks of the Valar and their allies. And so sudden and ruinous was the onset of that dreadful fleet that the host of the Valar was driven back, for the coming of the dragons was with great thunder and lightning and a tempest of fire. Caught off guard and overwhelmed by the sheer destruction that these winged terrors wrought, the forces of the Valar were driven back across the region. Yet, amidst despair, a glimmer of hope shone through. Eärendil the mariner, shining with white flame, with the Silmaril upon his brow, took to the skies aboard his ship Vingilot. Thorondor, king of the eagles, assisted Eärendil alongside a flock of giant eagles, in a tumultuous battle against the drakes. The battle between them was like none other, lighting up the heavens. For a full day and night they engaged in a celestial duel, their epic brawl echoing across the realms. But before the rising of the sun, Eärendil, brandishing the Silmaril, clashed with the monstrous dragon, and in a final glorious stroke slew Ancalagon the Black, the mightiest of the dragon host, and cast him from the sky. The heavens themselves trembled as the colossal dragon's lifeless form crashed upon Thangorodrim, the trio of volcanoes raised by Morgoth to protect Angband. Under the weight of his body, the peaks were broken to ruin, marking the end of the largest dragon ever to have existed and heralding the downfall of Morgoth. Then the sun rose, and the host of the Valar prevailed, and well nigh all the dragons were destroyed. With Morgoth's most powerful weapon defeated, the forces of the Valar and their allies rallied, reclaiming the ground they had lost. In the final throes of his empire's collapse, Morgoth fled into the deepest of his mines and sued for peace and pardon, cowering and hiding from the encroaching forces of the Valar. The death of Ancalagon signalled the defeat of Morgoth's forces. His last desperate roll of the dice, yet he was unable to overthrow the host of Valinor. Morgoth's feet were hewn from under him, and he was hurled upon his face. Chained and cast into the void, Morgoth's reign of terror over Middle-earth came to an end. Let's now take a look at just how huge Ancalagon was. Whilst his exact size is never explicitly mentioned, we can gather clues by studying other creatures whose sizes were better documented. Thorondor, who battled Ancalagon, was noted to have a wingspan of 30 fathoms, or approximately 180 feet. This would make him and his great eagles each roughly the size of a Boeing 767 passenger aircraft. For reference, Smaug in the Hobbit movies was depicted with a wingspan of 360 feet and a body length of over 420 feet. As Smaug was only twice as large as Thorondor in terms of wingspan, it seems fair to conclude that a flock of giant eagles would have been able to defeat him in a fight, given that eagles are usually able to kill animals larger than themselves. Compare this to the battle between the eagles and Ancalagon. Despite fighting for a day and a night, in the end it came down to Eärendil and his Silmaril to defeat the beast. Assuming that Eärendil wasn't the only one pulling his weight in battle, the eagles must have been more than capable of killing dragons, yet they could not bring Ancalagon down. It would be fair to say that the lesser dragons defeated by the eagles would have been no smaller than Smaug, with Ancalagon being the largest amongst them. The biggest clue to Ancalagon's size lies in the following. And he fell upon the towers of Thangorodrim, and they were broken in his ruin. Now another question arises. How big were the towers? Well, we know that Morgoth raised the volcanoes himself, so we can probably draw comparisons to cinder cone volcanoes, which are typically formed in a single eruptive period lasting a few months, rather than the types of volcanoes that are built up over thousands of years. Cinder cone volcanoes average around 1,600 feet wide, with the largest rarely exceeding around 1,100 feet in height. Let's suppose Thangorodrim is of this average size. Let us also assume that Ancalagon's falling body did not land upon the towers with wings fully spread. We can imagine this based upon the scene in the Hobbit movies where Smaug's body fell from the sky. So the area of impact may have been only half of his actual wingspan. Ancalagon would have had to come into impact with all three volcanoes at least partially to bring them to destruction. If he had fallen right in the centre of the middle volcano, the range of his impact would therefore have had to exceed the volcano's width. Let's say at least another 400 feet on each side to do sufficient damage, bringing us to a range of 2,400 feet. If we double this impact range, we arrive at an estimated 4,800 feet in wingspan, and, assuming his proportions are similar to those of Smaug, we can infer an estimated body length of over a mile. That's more than 13 times the size of Smaug. And of course he could even be many times this size still.
He would have squashed Glaurung like an ant. You see, Ancalagon the Black was the greatest dragon of Middle-earth. He was enormous. He could probably have flattened Thangorodrim 10 times over.
He was big, yes. But is biggest really best? What did Ancalagon really achieve? In spite of being the largest and most devastating dragon ever to take to the skies, Ancalagon was defeated only shortly after his introduction, and was quite possibly the biggest underachiever in the whole of Middle-earth. Could such a dragon really be called the greatest when compared to Glaurung, who sacked Nargothrond, caused the tragic demise of Húrin, and successfully defended Angband in the Battle of Sudden Flame, all in spite of lacking in size and flight?
That's enough, Lyra. Ancalagon would have conquered all of Middle-earth had it not been for that meddling elf on his flying ship. Glaurung would have easily been defeated by the giant eagles. Let's agree to disagree and let the comments section decide. Krug, out. Wait a minute. If Ancalagon was really this big, then how big was Angband? And how exactly did he get out without bringing the stronghold to demolition on his way out or causing massive earthquakes?